Hi team, my normal filming day is going to be kind of busy with some extra commitments, so I'm filming a day early right after my workout, but I'll also put this up tomorrow. I'm going to combine the next two Longpoint plays together because one of them is a disarm, and if you're in the SCA, it's pretty much not applicable to you at all. And even in a HEMA context, if you're thinking kind of tournament centric, it's a little tough to pull off. And if you're watching a video series called Backyard Basics, this is a particularly hard one to practice as a solo drill. So I'm going to read you the translation of the disarm and show you how I mime it by myself. And then we'll get into a play that's a little bit easier to practice as a solo drill or on the pel. So here comes the disarm. When you bind your opponent, then release your left hand from the pommel and use it to grip his blade to yours in the bind, and do it quickly. Then go through below with your right hand and the haft and strike up towards your right, as you can see in the two small figures on the right in image H. Thus you take his sword away from him. So that's the disarm. So what has happened is we have bound to our opponent, and now we're actually going to grab both swords. So to me, this requires a step forward. So what we're going to do is we're going to step forward, reach, and we're going to kind of bind, grab them both. And then I'm going to use a hip drive to punch my hilt up to the outside of their right. So across the line here. And I'm going to use my hips to drive this back. And this driving, this motion, is what's going to create the disarm. And the hip, the core engagement is very important. If I try to do this just with my arms, and I'm just out here, it just becomes my arm strength versus their arm strength, and that's not a good way to fight. So remember, if you're practicing this and you have a partner, that's great, or if you're trying to mime it, bind, step, hip drive, hip torque, and that is going to take their sword away and get your point in line for a follow-up thrust if that's what you want to do. The only other technical thing besides really being mindful of the hip and core engagement is that in the image that Meyer shows, image H, when we get up into this position, your wrist is ending up behind the crease of the opponent's wrist. And if you think about it, if we start wrenching that with the leverage, that's a really good place to kind of break their grip. So if you are lucky enough to have a partner at home where you're practicing, or you're in a place where partner practice is allowed again, and you want to practice this, be slow and careful. Step to the bind, step to the grip, drive, see if you can get behind their wrist, wrench with the core, and then like I said, that gives you a nice follow-up thrust. So when I'm doing this on the pel, I just go bind, step, wrench, and just make sure if I wanted to, I can maybe step out a little bit and thrust them. I don't practice this much on the pel just because you really need that partner feedback to get kind of refine your positioning. But for completeness' sake, we're at least going to talk about this play. So let's talk about the more blade work focus plate. It's a little bit easier to practice on the pel. It's also pretty short, so that's nice. Sorry, I lost my page. All right. So if your opponent binds you with extended sword on yours, then note when the bind connect together and quickly change through below and flick the little flat of the foible at his ear from the other side. From this changing through, you will learn to do many fine devices if you diligently study it. So this is very short and fairly simple. This is one of those good examples where if we are being in a sporting context, you know, with Meyer, if you're a fine German fencing another fine German, we're not going to stab them in the face. We're going to do this little foible flip. So we're coming to the bind. And remember, the change through is essentially that disengage, right? So for Meyer, we're going to come to the bind, change through, and whack him with the flat. To the bind, change through, whack him with the flat. So if I'm doing this on the pel, I'm just going to come to the bind, change through, and I really like to do this with the step, whack him with the flat. Now, that's great. If you are in an SCA context where flat shots are not going to count, or you're in a HEMA tournament context where flat shots are not going to count, or you're not fencing another fine German and you would like to stab them in the face, it's actually easier. You're going to cut, disengage, and just keep your point on line and thrust them. So that is actually an easier motion. It is more difficult to come around and whack them with the flat than it is to just cut to the bind, disengage, and stab them in the face. So that's all we're doing, is we're faking that we're coming into the bind, disengaging and stabbing to the face. That's why that drift out with the left foot is going to be really important, because if I do this and I don't make contact, their point's right on my face. So I want to make sure that I'm faking the bind and then getting off the line to stab it. So this one, when I practice on the Pell, cut, stab. Cut, stab. Cut, stab. Easy enough. So just remember, if you want to do the play as written, cut like you're going to bind, disengage, whack them with the flat. If you want to practice this as if you're being a little bit more lethal to your opponent, or you have a particular rule set where the thrust is going to be better than hitting with the flat, just disengage and stab them in the face. So these are the next kind of 2 long points. Hopefully this was good. I am, like I said, in a little bit of rush. It ended up being kind of a crunched weekend. So I'm still in my workout clothes because I just finished doing that and I'm trying to squeeze this in. I'll upload it tomorrow and I hope that these are fun and useful.